Meow! Huples cat, the armchair prepper. So stay tuned, and we're going to look at the highlights and lowlights of this book. Get comfortable doing your toilet things out there if you have the chance, and do this responsibly with digging a hole and covering up. Meow! I'm Huples cat. That was from 5 years ago, 2019, when I did a nearly 1 hour review of this book. This is the update of the review that I've been wanting to do for some time. To be kind to you, I'm going to break it down into sections. During the 1990s, there was civil war in Yugoslavia. Selco Failed was actually under siege for quite some time. Where and how long isn't specified. I'm guessing Sarajevo. After that phase of the civil war ended, it's still going on, he actually emigrated. And since then, Selco has been amazed at the absolute cluelessness of North American preppers like you and me.
So, okay, like right now, for example, the Haitians need to come to America.
The book had a profound effect upon me as a person and as a prepper. Now, the Civil War is kind of irrelevant. Why, who, etc., etc. Very fascinating history, absolutely irrelevant to what Selco's message is. Just out of interest, I found this book a while ago, and it's actually kind of interesting because it's from a British point of view, and it actually refutes a lot of the known things about the Yugoslavian war. But as I said, who, why and what is actually irrelevant here. It's the effects on Selco and his family and his city, what he did to survive, how he survived, how people didn't survive. Selco's made numerous blog posts and has been heavily reviewed by lots and lots of people, and in fact has written lots more books. If you have the time and money and interest, you might want to even take one of his courses. He does courses in urban survival based upon his experiences in the 1990s. If you're very rich, you can pay for a private course designed to your specifications. This book is in 4 parts. The difference between your plans and reality, which is the longest part of this book. The shocking reality of SHTF. SHTF stands for Poop Hits the Fan. The idea is that poops happen, there's been an event, and now it's hit a fan and it's being spread far and wide with unforeseen consequences. Selco doesn't really explain what it means, but SHTF here means a societal fall, temporary or long term. The truth about death and violence. This part I'm not going to dwell on too much. It's pretty graphic. I've read it before, I've actually reviewed it before. If you want to know about this stuff, buy his book. Part 4 is the shortest part of this book, after the collapse. Now, as you might have gathered from the contents list, this warning of this book is absolutely 100% true. There is horrific graphic content. Be aware of that before you read it. In this updated review, I'm not actually going to get into very much detail about the horrific and graphic content. It is, in effect, a shiny object dangling out there for you to read his book, not to watch this video. This video is going to be about things that he got right, things I think he got wrong, and the major lessons I think he has for me as a North American prepper in 2024. But the message he has for you in 2024 may very, very well be different from the message he has for me. Part 1 is the difference between your plans and reality. I have in the past taught change theory at university, and I can tell you it's an absolute universal truth. It's not the changes that do you in, but the transitions. The transition between the old state and the new state of being, that is where the problem is, that is where the tension is. Until you can get out of the transition phase and accept and be part of the new change, you're in trouble. You have to let go of the old change as fast as you can and grab the new change. That's easier said than done. You need to adapt in mind, body and spirit as fast as you can to the new state. Selco largely blames the mass media for the numerous wars that occurred in the former country of Yugoslavia in the 1990s, and like I said, those tensions have not gone away in 2024. It barely represents the numerous other causes of the Yugoslavian crisis, but for our purposes in 2024, that's fine. I don't really care why they had this. I don't really care why he was there. I'm interested in the effects on him and people around him of being in the middle of a civil war. But it is true that NATO's KFOR force is still there and still taking casualties, and without that force, civil war would resume almost immediately. Whenever you find yourself in a situation when you feel you generally hate groups of people, options or states, stop for a moment and go through serious mental check. Are you being manipulated by someone, and what are the reasons for that? I endorse that message. He graphically describes the chaos of being caught up in a civil war. And the truth is, it wasn't all of Yugoslavia that was at war, just parts of it. And those parts were surrounded on almost all sides by NATO, by the European Union and by the former Soviet Union. An actual real war would have been much, much worse. The truth is, a lot of people survived because NATO forces were dropping MREs, meals ready to eat, into the sieged areas on a regular basis. Often not very effectively, but food was coming in from outside. In a world war or a global catastrophe, there will be no food coming in from outside. On page 29 he says, whenever I read the words, I'll do that, when SHTF, I feel bad. Because in essence, you do not know what you will be forced to do, but you will have to do it when the day comes. Because on the way you adapt and overcome, not by sticking hard to your imagined, I will only do that. Have lots of plans for disasters and types of disasters that are actually bent to your personal needs and the location you're in. Throw them out the window as soon as you need to. That's the main message from Selco. Have plans, have stores, walk away from them rather than die. Many preppers online talk about being sheepdogs to guard the sheep from the wolves in a disaster. They are fantasists. They know nothing, literally nothing, what a smaller society would do to them and to the people around them. To survive, being extremely evil, a vicious wolf preying on everybody, wasn't necessarily the best thing. But equally, being a sheep wasn't the greatest way to survive either. And if you tried to be a guard dog, well, you would die. So what would you be in a major disaster? The book answers that. Selco talks a lot about failure of imagination causing harm in a disaster. He does it himself. Having the idea that some foreign forces will invade your country, forces that will look, act, speak completely different than you, and people from your surroundings are mostly just fantasies, especially when we talk about the USA. The inability of him, and almost all Americans I ever speak to online, to actually understand the fact that the United States of America could have foreign forces on it, occupying it, is fascinating to me. They seem to honestly believe that history will not affect their country at any point. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen today or tomorrow, and certainly Red Dawn and stuff like that is absolute garbage, as is 1 second after. But imagine everything that could possibly go wrong, and make plans that you can safely and sanely do accordingly. But to exclude foreign invasion because it cannot happen to America is not the best idea. However, also on page 33, he nails an essential truth. Stronger systems are going to have a bigger and longer fall. And of course, currently China and America are the two biggest forces. But the thing is, he then goes on to say, no way can America be invaded because there's too many people with guns and nobody's going to invade it. That might be true to him, but it's a failure of imagination to not imagine a scenario where part or all of the United States does in fact get occupied by a foreign force. Certainly here in Canada, we know America is our biggest threat, followed by Russia for our invasion, and we actually plan for invasion of Canada as preppers. Our government does not. However, on page 33, Selco then says this: what is possible is to push some country into chaos in order to turn on themselves, suffer hunger, prolong chaos and similar, and maybe then to invade. Isn't that the truth? I think we've been seeing multiple evidence in the West of foreign forces trying to destabilise us. But in truth, in the West, we've been doing that to the rest of the world for many decades. So it's kind of no surprise the rest of the world's starting to do it to us. There is no day off or break. And there's no protection. There is no certainty. There is nothing very static and sure when SHTF, one day the house next to you can be completely safe, another day there might be someone inside who wants to harm you. What about when one day a big group comes to ask you how you're doing so okay and what have you there? To protect your stuff from them is a clear death sentence. What will you do? You have to have the right mindset. It means the difference between defending something and getting killed and adapting yourself in order to survive without it. You have to accept the fact that maybe you'll be forced to survive only with your skills. Certainly a lot of North American preppers have an absolute fantasy about the Alamo and standing there and defending their stuff and their families from the hordes of Democrats or immigrants or whatever they imagine is going to come and take their stuff, their wealth away in a disaster. Pure fantasy. It's your own family, your own neighbours that are going to provide the risk to you, and you to them in a failure of society. I'm not talking about an ice storm, I'm talking about a complete failure of modern society. The lack of food, complete lack of hygiene, level of contamination, risk of illness and injury, being found, being informed on, being tricked, getting captured, and many, many more make up a large amount of threats than most people ever think of. Just to imagine every supply you take for granted, fuel, electricity, water, stores, emergency services, etc., law, being taken away and not knowing when, if ever, it will come back. With good preparation and correct mentality, you can minimise the shock and make it shorter. That's the real point of preparing. Years ago now, I did a video where I actually asked people to answer a question. The question was simple for those people out there with children. If you had to bug out, bearing in mind most people have a very strange idea what a bug out actually is, what are you going to do if there is a clear and present threat closing in on you that you know will kill you or enslave you, and one of your children can't keep up? At what point, I asked, would you leave that child behind so the other child, your wife and yourself, could escape? Many people that did respond to that responded incorrectly by saying they would never leave anybody in their group behind. It just wouldn't happen. They're with their family, they're with their kids. It's been a fall of society. They're escaping from a threat. They see the armed gangs coming. They've seen what the armed gangs have done to people like them, and the armed gangs are almost upon them, and the child cannot keep up, and you cannot carry the child. What do? Well, you leave the child and you escape, and you have guilt for the rest of your life. But your priority is to survive. By protecting everybody you love, you can kill everybody you love. This is not Hollywood stuff. Adapt fast or die. No matter how much food, ammo, training and skills you have, when SHTF you are going to be surprised. Most of us have been in the mode of preparing for something that is not happening for years. And when it finally happens, there is going to be a period of shock for the folks. And in that period, a lot of people are going to die. Page 45. I cannot get rid of a feeling that a majority of people see SHTF as big fun. Shooting while drinking beer, with additional testing of all their cool gear. I see that in blogs, comments, forums, documentaries, movies. I have had more than one participant of my course who told me, this is not fun, it's hard and not so pleasant. Now prepping is my hobby and I have fun with it. I've had real experience of pain, death and suffering. I know what that is. In no way do I want to pick living in an SHTF over any other method of living. It's just simply not a good idea. In the 1980s in Britain, I was told that it was better to be dead than red. As it turned out, if we'd fought a nuclear war in 1983 or 1984 or 1986 or 1988, I would have probably died. And I can tell you in 2024, I would rather have been conquered by Russia. It would have given me an opportunity to survive and possibly thrive and possibly alter the system later on. Being nuked and killed for no apparent reason wouldn't have helped me at all. If you know people that want to be dead rather than X, Y or Z, avoid them. They're not quite orientated to reality. Prepping rule number 1 is do not die. Prepping rule number 2 is do nothing to increase your chances of dying. I think most people agree with that. Prepping rule 3 is to do whatever it takes to survive. Whatever. That's going to be a problem for a lot of people who haven't thought, have failed imaginations. Here, take my engagement ring, just let me pass. So people aren't going to think that he's got more engagement rings in his pocket and they might let him pass. Or they might not. If you hand them a gold coin, they're definitely going to think, I wonder if he has more gold coins on him. And they probably won't let you pass and they'll probably have a look for the gold coin. Precious metals is just one example of people out there making ludicrous plans based on fantasy that will kill them if society actually collapses. Page 47. Common sense is something that is missing mostly in mainstream prepper movement. I understand that it is business. It's about money. But folks, choose carefully what advice you are taking as real. No surprise I agree with that. No surprise those channels are heavily promoted. No surprise people are very loyal to those channels. Because humans, when we put our flag against the mast of a bad ship, it takes a lot for us to take the flag down from the mast and go to a different ship, especially if we have to swim in the water for a while. The survival movement is big business and has become much more about selling items to make you believe that you are prepared than about learning and gaining knowledge. I agree with Selco on that, but I think he's missing a point, a fundamental truth here. A lot of the big channels are selling something different, something intangible. They're selling a false sense of fake community and a false sense of fake survivability, whatever happens. By telling people about threats over and over and over, with occasional snippets of information that generally speaking they've stolen from other people, they're selling products, or not, but they're selling safety. That's how they're making their core audience feel safe. There's a big prepper online. I liked his stuff initially, and then he moved to his bug out location and he went crazy, and he's got a huge following. Oh, he had a huge following, I don't check. And like me, he was a nurse. He talked a lot about security and gardening, and his gardens were pitifully small. His security was strange because he was living in literally a wooden shack. Now, he felt safer there than in a brick and concrete house, but he's in this wooden shack and you can hear his neighbours on the road and you can see them very close to him. And he's giving the impression that he's miles and miles from anywhere, and he's not. He's in a small local community where most people are armed, and he's living in a hut that's got very thin walls. What's going to happen in a disaster when people run out of food? He's going to fight them all, kill them all, and be surviving? If you hear the phrase "bring it on," where somebody online or in comments is telling you they want disaster to start now because they're ready for it and they're tired of waiting for it, please understand that person is deranged. They're deluded and they know literally nothing what a disaster would be like, what a fall of society would be like. Bring it on, because I will be fine. Avoid those people. They're dangerous to you. The reality is always different. One student asked me if it was true that when I drank water simply from a puddle of water. I said yes, with my shirt as a filter only. You need to understand that each and every skill you have will be disrupted some way in a real SHTF, so you will be forced to shorten procedures. He talks about this layering. It's actually one of his major themes. He talks about layering. So you have a layer of protection. So right now the protection would be, for most people, municipal water supply. For me it's a well that I check regular. Open the tap, pump, clean fresh water comes into my house, poop, it goes out to a septic tank in my case. But if my well fails, I have backups. Independently, I've got layers. I've got things I like, things I need, things I want, things I'll do. Taps fail, I have a gravity water filter system that's going to last for quite some time, and in fact, yes, I do have extras of these. 18,000 litres, easy to use, hard to contaminate. Just throw the water in and out it comes. Though in a disaster scenario, I'm going to pre-filter the water as much as I can, if I need to. Selco had to eventually drink out of pools of water, muddy pools with smell of death and rotten feces in it, and he had to drink out of a river that had dead bodies in it. Do whatever you can to survive. But it would have been nice if he'd actually had some skills, some training beforehand, because things like SODIS can easily be hidden, can easily be used, and is a game changer. If all else fails, try not to drink out of muddy pools and dead rivers. It's easy to actually get water, put it in little glass bottles and plastic bottles, leave it in the sun somewhere nobody's going to really notice it, and after a couple of days, you've got fresh, clean, sterile water. It'll be warm, but it's safe. So when do you go into survival mode? Recently there was a worldwide infectious disease that's still going on that many preppers had prepped for and said that they were going to bug out, get away from other people, hide in a forest, go to their bug out resort and just ride it out until the vaccine was ready. As far as I can tell, nobody actually bugged out and nobody actually did follow through on their initial plans. They adapted and changed them, which is good, but at the same time they also decided it wasn't a personal threat to them anymore, when clearly it still was, and decided to live a life pretending they were safe when clearly they were not. To this day there's still people out there that think the vaccine was harmful. I took it as soon as it was available to me. I understand how infectious diseases and vaccines work. To this day I know people are going to tell me that the vaccine killed more people than died in the pandemic. Absolute lies. I worked in healthcare. I know who was getting sick and who was dying and why. In a major teaching hospital, Canada's biggest trauma hospital, I saw exactly 0 vaccine side effects. 0. Saw a lot of people die from the pandemic though. But reality is something we try not to base prepping on, because it's almost impossible as human beings to base our lives on reality. So how do you know when real SHTF has arrived? Page 70. The easiest and pretty lame and lazy answer is you need to leave your job as soon as you see something bad is happening around you and go home and bug in, bug out, or whatever your plan is. So we're actually talking about here to recognise the big event, the real SHTF event, from which point society will collapse and never come back. When you need to jump into that survival mode and stop worrying too much about insurance, groceries and your regular day-to-day life. The real answer here is there is no universal answer. There is no specific point to which you will recognise it, but definitely there are some things to pay attention to. It depends on what, where, how you are, where you live. It depends on a whole bunch of different things, and that's where imagination comes into play. You may miss the signs. I did. I have seen all the signs above and failed to run. I ended up right in the middle of SHTF. Oh, it cannot happen here. Somebody, somehow, is going to solve everything. Sometimes when I read survival forums, I see people living in fear, even though life is not bad for them at the moment. If I have any wishes for everyone, it is that people get serious about survival and preparedness, but also enjoy good times as long as they last. That's the end of part 1. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments below the parts you agree with and disagree with and why, and you can get into huge detail. I read everybody's comments because I'm a small channel and I'll respond to most people. You may not want me to respond to you the way I'm going to respond to you because I'm going to be honest like I always am, but let's have a dialogue, let's be open here, let's figure out stuff, because you know what? The big prepping channels aren't helping us. Doodles! This has been a 2024 Wolfie Terrier production.